Assalamu alaikum. In all banking transactions, when parties enter into a loan contract, they agree to the terms and conditions. Therefore, there is mutual consent between the parties. So if there is a interest condition in that contract, for example, party A advances a loan to party B and both the parties agree that 5% interest will be charged on that loan amount, there is mutual consent between the parties for that interest amount as well. Since there is mutual consent in this contract, is this transaction allowed? This is a normal argument or a very common argument advanced by many people that since there is mutual consent in a loan contract to accrue or earn interest, this interest or riba should be allowed and there is no harm in it. The underlying logic or the basis of this argument is that if there is mutual consent between the parties, the contract should be allowed. To answer this question, we need to understand that mutual consent is, of course, a very important requirement in contracts that are to be executed as per the Islamic law. However, mutual consent is a requirement for transactions and muamalat which are already allowed or permissible under Sharia. So if one party is entering into a sale contract with another party, or if one party is selling his commodity to another party, both the parties need to agree on such sale through offer and acceptance. They need to agree on the price and they need to agree on the terms of the payment. So there has to be a mutual consent to make the sale valid. Similarly, if someone is renting his house or his car to the other party, both parties need to agree on the rental amount, the term of the rental contract, and so on. So there has to be mutual consent. But this mutual consent is required in contracts and in muamalat which are already allowed or permissible under Sharia. If there is no mutual consent in contracts which are already allowed by Sharia, those contracts will be invalid. So if one party sells or buys something from another party, and that another party is under duress to sell that asset to first party, then that sale contract will be invalid. However, for transactions or muamalat which are impermissible under Sharia or which are not allowed by Sharia, those contracts or those muamalat will not become permissible just because the parties involved in that contract have a mutual consent to it. So this is very important to understand. All contracts, all muamalat which are already permissible require mutual consent between the parties to execute and validate. But if any transaction or muamala which is not allowed by Sharia, which is impermissible, mutual consent between the parties to execute that contract will not make that contract or muamala as permissible. For example, two people might mutually agree to commit zina or adultery. That will not make that act permissible. Similarly, one person might agree or ask another person to inject some drugs into his body. Now, if both the parties agreeing to it, the other party is not allowed to inject such drugs or do this act just because there is mutual consent between the parties. So we need to be very clear on this. And since riba has been declared impermissible, non-compliant, and haram in very clear terms by Quran and Sunnah and by Islamic law, any mutual consent between the parties to enter into riba will not make any riba contract or any loan contract in which parties agree to transfer benefit or accrue benefit to the lender will not make it permissible just because there is a mutual consent between the parties. I hope this discussion was useful. Jazakallahu khair. Assalamu alaikum.